Okay, I need to confess something to someone, and since you're here listening and not going to judge me, here goes absolutely everything. So there I was at our company's annual gala, looking absolutely incredible in this black dress I'd spent weeks planning, knowing deep down this was my chance to finally shine in front of all the executives who actually controlled my career trajectory. Marcus was there as my plus one, doing his typical thing of just standing around looking awkward in his rental tuxedo, while I networked the room like the absolute professional I am. Richard, my boss, and legitimately the most powerful man in that entire ballroom, had been giving me these looks all evening, the kind that made my stomach flip in ways Marcus never could anymore. I'd been involved with Richard for about 4 months at that point. Nothing too intense, just some after-hours office encounters and a handful of hotel meetings when we traveled together for business conferences. Marcus had absolutely no idea, obviously, because he's perpetually too focused on his boring little existence to notice when his wife is actually thriving and receiving the attention she genuinely deserves. Richard approached me near the bar section, and I could sense that familiar electricity crackling between us, the way he commanded instant respect from everyone in his vicinity, while Marcus just faded into the background like generic furniture. When Richard placed his hand on my lower back, it felt natural, powerful, like I finally belonged next to someone who actually mattered in the corporate hierarchy, instead of some guy who comes home and binge watches streaming shows every single night. The conversation was flowing absolutely perfectly. Richard was introducing me to other executives as his right-hand associate, and I was finally feeling seen and valued for my intelligence and ambition. Then Richard made this comment about me being his companion for the evening, and it felt absolutely amazing to be claimed by someone so successful and self-assured. I saw Marcus approaching from across the ballroom with drinks, and honestly, part of me wanted him to witness how a real man treats a woman who deserves better than mediocrity. Richard's grip on my waist tightened slightly, and instead of pulling away like some timid housewife, I stayed right exactly where I was because I finally felt like I was precisely where I belonged. The expression on Marcus's face when he heard Richard's comment was priceless, this mixture of confusion and hurt that made me realize how pathetic he looked, just standing there with his mouth literally hanging open. Before I could even begin to process what was happening, Marcus had set down the drinks and was walking toward us with this strange intensity I'd genuinely never seen him before. Richard was still holding me, still conversing with the other executives like he owned the entire room, which he basically did. When Marcus reached us, the entire conversation stopped dead, and I could feel everyone's eyes boring into us, which should have been absolutely mortifying but felt kind of exhilarating. Marcus looked directly at Richard and asked if his behavior was appropriate, and I wanted to disappear because he was making such an enormous scene over nothing. Richard laughed it off like the confident executive he is, telling Marcus to stick to the open bar and let the adults handle business, which was honestly the perfect response to such childish jealousy. That's when everything went completely insane. Marcus actually grabbed Richard by the throat right there in front of absolutely everyone, and I watched in complete shock as my boss, this powerful man who could make or break entire careers, was being physically assaulted by my husband. The whole room went silent. Security was rushing over, and all I could think about was how Marcus had just destroyed everything I'd been working toward with his caveman behavior. Richard was on his knees, gasping and apologizing, and instead of feeling proud of my husband for defending me, I felt mortified that he'd made such a public spectacle over what was clearly just professional networking. Security escorted Marcus out while I stood there trying to process how my perfect evening had transformed into a complete disaster, knowing that everyone would be discussing this incident for months. The worst part wasn't even the violence. It was realizing that Marcus had just humiliated me in front of the most important people in my entire industry. potentially destroying relationships I'd spent years carefully building. 3 hours later, I was sitting in a police station waiting room, still wearing that black dress, but feeling completely deflated. Marcus was somewhere behind those doors, probably getting charged with assault, and I was left to clean up the mess he'd created. Richard had been surprisingly understanding about not pressing charges, probably because half the company witnessed what he'd said to me, but the damage was already catastrophically done. When they finally let me see Marcus, he looked different somehow. Not ashamed or apologetic like I expected, but almost calm, like he'd finally done something he'd been wanting to do for a very long time. The lawyer said they'd probably drop the charges if he agreed to anger management classes, which seemed like getting off easy for what he'd done. "What about you?" he asked when I told him about the charges. "Are you pressing charges against him for harassment?" I stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Why would I do that? It wasn't harassment. It's complicated. Complicated? Marcus stood up, and there was something in his voice that made me genuinely uncomfortable. A man grabs your waist at a public event and tells me you're his companion and it's complicated? I sighed, because he was being so dramatic about everything. You don't understand the corporate world. There are dynamics at play that you can't just solve with your fists. That's when he asked the question I'd been dreading. How long? I knew exactly what he meant, but I wasn't ready for this conversation. Not here, not like this. How long? What? Don't play games with me. You know exactly what I'm asking. The silence stretched between us, and I could see him putting the pieces together. The late nights at the office that had become more frequent, the way I dressed differently on certain days for important meetings, the tone in my voice when I talked about Richard. "It's not what you think," I said finally, but even I could hear how weak that sounded. "Then explain it to me, because from where I'm standing, it looks like my wife has been having an affair with her boss, and tonight he decided to publicly claim ownership of what he thinks is his." My shoulder slumped. There was no point in lying anymore. It started 4 months ago, after the Harrison contract. We were working late, and... Stop. He held up his hand. I don't need the details. I just need to know one thing. Was tonight the first time he's acted like that in public? I shook my head slowly, and I could see something die in his eyes. So this has been going on for months. Him treating you like his personal property, and you letting it happen? It's not that simple, I said, my voice getting defensive. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, the competition for senior partner positions. He has influence. So you decided to sleep your way to the top. The slap came fast, but he saw it coming and didn't try to avoid it. I needed him to feel some of what I was feeling. The frustration, the anger at being reduced to such a crude stereotype. Don't you dare judge me, I hissed. You work your little job and come home to your beer and streaming shows. I'm building something. I'm climbing a ladder you could never even reach. By spreading your legs for the boss. This time, when I raised my hand again, he caught my wrist. Once was enough, he said calmly. You want to talk about judgment? Let's talk about how you stood there tonight while another man humiliated your husband in front of 50 people. Let's talk about how your first concern isn't that I defended our marriage, but that it might complicate your career prospects. He released my wrist and sat back down. I want a divorce. The words hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't how this conversation was supposed to go. He was supposed to be apologetic about the scene he'd caused, not attacking me for trying to advance my career. You're being dramatic. One mistake doesn't end a marriage. One mistake. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. 4 months of lies. 4 months of letting another man treat you like his possession. 4 months of coming home to me and pretending to be a faithful wife. That's not one mistake. That's a pattern of choices. Hey, if you're invested in this story and want to hear how everything completely falls apart, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support genuinely helps small creators like me continue bringing you these real stories. Drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in this situation, because trust me, it gets so much worse from here. Okay, back to the disaster. I never slept with him, I said quickly, which was technically true. We'd done other things, but not actual intercourse. Don't lie to me anymore. I'm done with lies. I looked around the police station waiting area, suddenly aware that we weren't alone. A few other people were scattered around, and our voices had been getting louder. Can we please discuss this at home? No, we're going to discuss it right here, right now, because I'm not going home with you tonight or any other night. You chose him over me. You chose your career over our marriage. You chose to let another man disrespect both of us rather than stand up for what we built together. I was crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration, of anger that my carefully constructed world was falling apart because of his jealous outburst. Where will you go? I asked. That's not your concern anymore. What about the house, the mortgage? Keep it. Keep everything. I don't want anything that reminds me of the woman I thought I married. As we walked out of the station together, I tried one more time. This doesn't have to end our marriage. We can work through this. Counseling, therapy, whatever you want. He stopped walking and turned to face me under the fluorescent lights of the parking lot. You want to know the difference between us? When another man disrespected you tonight, my first instinct was to defend you. When I defended you, your first instinct was to protect him. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, but it is simple. You made your choice 4 months ago. Tonight, I made mine. I spent the next morning at my sister's place, nursing a cup of coffee and staring at my phone. 17 missed calls from Richard, 12 text messages ranging from concerned to panicked. The company's HR department had already called twice, asking me to come in for a meeting about the incident. Around noon, I drove to the office building and parked across the street. I needed to see Richard to figure out our next move, to salvage what we could from this disaster. Within an hour, he pulled up in his silver Mercedes, but something was different. The way the security guard nodded at him lacked the usual deference. A few employees in the lobby glanced at him and whispered to each other. When I met him at our usual coffee spot downtown, he looked rattled in a way I'd never seen before. His expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that he was genuinely shaken by what had happened. "This is a nightmare," he said before I could even sit down. "Legal is breathing down my neck. HR wants a full investigation. Half the company saw what happened." "What are we going to do?" I asked. "We?" He looked at me like I was insane. There is no we anymore. This whole thing was a mistake. I should never have let it go this far. I felt my stomach drop. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I have a career to protect, a reputation. I can't be associated with this kind of drama. Drama that you created by putting your hands on me in public and making that comment about me being your companion? That was nothing. Harmless flirtation. Your husband is the one who turned it into something violent and public." I stared at him across the table, finally seeing him clearly for the first time. This man I'd risked everything for, who I thought was so powerful and confident, was throwing me under the bus to save himself. "So that's it? 4 months of late nights and hotel rooms, and you're just going to pretend it never happened? What did you expect? That I'd leave my wife for you? That we'd have some fairy tale romance?" He shook his head. "You're a married woman having an affair. I'm a married man who made some poor choices. Now we both need to deal with the consequences." My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "I know you're at Romano's with him. Enjoy lunch." I looked around frantically, then saw his truck parked across the street. He was watching us, probably taking pictures. The paranoia hit me like a wave. What else did he know? What else had he figured out? "I have to go," I said abruptly. Brooklyn, wait. But I was already walking away, my mind racing. That evening, I went home to find Marcus packing clothes into a gym bag. The house felt different, like a stage where a play had been performed for months, without me realizing I was just a prop in someone else's story. "What are you doing?" I asked, though it was obvious. "Taking some things, I'll be back for the rest later." "You don't have to do this. We can work through this." He looked up from his packing, and there was something in his expression that made me take a step back. "I did what I probably should have done months ago. I looked through your things, your laptop." I'd forgotten about my laptop. "Your password was our anniversary date, same pattern you've used for years." He pulled out a manila folder, thick with printed pages. 4 months of emails, hotel reservations, weekends disguised as work conferences, plans to handle the husband situation after Richard's promotion went through. I felt the room start to spin. He had everything. Every message, every reservation, every intimate detail I'd shared with Richard about our relationship. "You went through my private emails?" "Your private emails about our marriage. I think that makes them my business." He opened the folder, scanning the pages. "Let's see. Hotel reservations for weekends I thought you were at work conferences. Messages about how naive your husband is. Plans to handle the husband situation after your boyfriend gets promoted." Each revelation felt like a physical blow. I wanted to deny it, to explain, but the evidence was right there in black and white. The spa weekend with your friends last month? Actually, a weekend at the Marriott downtown with him. The work conference in Chicago that never happened? You were at his cabin upstate. "Stop reading those," I said quietly. "The best part is this message from 3 weeks ago, where you tell him how guilty you feel lying to me. And he responds by saying you shouldn't feel guilty about upgrading your life." The word upgrading hit me like a slap. Had I really written that? Had I really been that callous about my own marriage for months? Marcus continued. 4 months of elaborate lies, hotel reservations, fake conferences, and mocking your naive husband behind his back. And last night, when I defended you, your first concern was protecting him. I was crying now, but not from remorse, from anger, from frustration that my private thoughts and feelings were being thrown back at me like weapons. "I never meant for it to go this far," I said. "You meant for it to go further. You and your boyfriend were planning to handle the husband situation after his promotion. You've been planning to leave me. You just wanted to wait until he had more power and security." "It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You've been using me for stability while positioning yourself for something better." He picked up his bag and headed for the door. I followed him, desperate to make him understand. "Where are you going?" "Away from here, away from you, away from this entire situation you created. We can fix this. Marriage counseling, anything you want." He stopped at the door and turned back to me. "You want to fix this? Call your boyfriend and tell him the husband situation just handled itself." The next morning, I sat in a family law attorney's office with copies of everything Marcus had found. The lawyer, a sharp woman in her 50s, reviewed the evidence with clinical detachment. "This is comprehensive," she said, flipping through the printed emails. "In a no-fault divorce state, this won't affect property division, but it certainly paints a clear picture of marital misconduct." What does that mean for me? It means your husband has a strong case if he wants to make this public. Court documents become public record. Filing for divorce based on adultery creates a paper trail that anyone can access. My stomach dropped. Public record? There's something else you should consider. Your employer has policies regarding relationships between supervisors and subordinates. What's documented here could constitute workplace harassment, abuse of power, and policy violations. Before I could fully process what she was saying, my phone rang. Unknown number. "This is David Mitchell from corporate HR. We need you to come in for a meeting regarding the incident at the company gala." The meeting was scheduled for the next morning. I barely slept that night, tossing and turning as I tried to figure out how to explain everything without destroying my career. But when I arrived at the office, I could tell something had changed. The receptionist avoided eye contact. Colleagues who usually stopped to chat hurried past without acknowledgement. Richard was already in the conference room when I arrived, looking pale and defeated. The HR representative, along with someone from legal, had a thick folder on the table between them. "We've received some concerning information about policy violations involving both of you," the HR rep began. "Specifically documented evidence of an inappropriate relationship between a supervisor and direct report." My mouth went dry. Marcus had actually done it. He'd reported us to the company. The evidence was overwhelming. Every email, every hotel receipt, every message thread laid out chronologically. They asked about specific dates, specific incidents, specific policy violations. Richard tried to minimize everything, claiming it was just friendly mentoring that had been misinterpreted, but the documentation was too detailed, too explicit. "Based on our investigation," the legal representative said, "we're recommending immediate termination for both employees involved. Policy violations, abuse of power, and creating a hostile work environment." "Both employees?" I managed to ask. "You were aware of the policy and chose to engage in the relationship anyway. You're equally responsible." Just like that, my career was over. Years of climbing the corporate ladder, building relationships, positioning myself for advancement, all of it destroyed in a single meeting. Richard and I were escorted out separately. No goodbye, no chance to collect personal items, no severance package, just security guards walking us to our cars like common criminals. That evening, I showed up at Dylan's house where Marcus was staying. I looked terrible. Hair unwashed, makeup smudged, wearing the same clothes from the day before. The confident corporate executive was gone, replaced by someone who looked desperate and broken. "I lost my job," I said simply when Marcus answered the door. "I know. Richard lost his too." "I have nothing left." "You have what you chose. Actions have consequences." "I made a mistake." "You made a choice. Every day for 4 months, you chose to lie to me, to mock me, to plan a future with another man. That wasn't a mistake. That was who you really are." I stood there for a moment, tears streaming down my face. "What happens now?" "Now, you figure out your life without me in it, just like you were planning to do anyway." "I never wanted it to end like this." "You wanted to handle the husband situation. Congratulations, you did." The divorce was finalized 2 months later. I got half of our assets, as expected, but my career was destroyed, and my reputation in the industry was ruined. Word travels fast in corporate circles, especially when it involves policy violations and public scenes at company events. Richard tried to find another executive position, but the termination followed him everywhere. Last I heard, he was working for a much smaller company at a fraction of his previous salary. His wife had found out about everything and taken him for half of everything in their divorce, too. I ended up taking a job in retail, the only place that would hire me after my professional reputation was destroyed. The pay was a fraction of what I used to make, barely enough to cover the mortgage on the house I'd insisted on keeping. 8 months after everything fell apart, I was working a closing shift when I saw Marcus walk into the store with a woman I didn't recognize. She was pretty in an understated way, laughing at something he'd said. They were shopping for furniture, the kind of domestic activity that couples do when they're building a life together. He looked happy, genuinely happy, in a way I couldn't remember seeing him when we were married. The woman was hanging on his arm, looking at him with obvious affection, and he was responding with the kind of attention I'd always wanted from him, but never appreciated when I had it. They didn't see me behind the customer service counter, and I watched them browse through home goods like they were planning a future together. When they got to the checkout line at the other end of the store, I heard her laugh again. Genuine, warm, completely different from the calculated sounds I used to make. That night, I went home to the empty house that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. The mortgage was behind, the utilities were about to be shut off, and I was facing the reality that I'd traded everything stable and real for a fantasy that never existed. I thought about Richard, probably sitting in his own empty apartment, wondering how he'd gone from corner office to retail management. I thought about the other executives who'd witnessed the gala incident, probably still talking about the night that powerful Richard got put on his knees by some nobody's husband. But mostly, I thought about Marcus, shopping for furniture with someone who probably appreciated what she had instead of constantly looking for something better. Someone who didn't mock them behind his back or plan exit strategies while pretending to build a future together. Fine, yeah, I cheated. I lied for months. I let another man disrespect my husband in public while I stood there enjoying the attention. I mocked Marcus in emails, calling him naive and simple, while planning to leave him for someone with more money and power. But he pushed me to it with his constant contentment, his refusal to want more, his satisfaction with a life I found suffocating. The truth is, I got exactly what I deserved. I just never thought the consequences would be this permanent, this complete, this utterly devastating to everything I thought I was building. I wanted to upgrade my life, and instead, I downgraded everything. My career, my home, my future, my sense of who I was. Now I'm 30 years old, working retail, living alone in a house I can't afford, watching my ex-husband build the kind of happiness with someone else that I threw away because I thought I deserved better. The husband situation got handled. All right.